So we're live. Welcome to this deliberations meeting Wednesday, 16th of October 2024. It's the deliberations meeting, but it runs as a full council meeting would run. So the first thing I'll ask for is there any apologies? Apologies. Okay.
Here.
Can I have a mover for the confirmation of the agenda? Councillor Howard, seconder. To Rachel Williams. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
And carried. A conflict of interest declaration. Is there any conflicts? Yeah. No. Okay. So we have the 2024 shortened representation review deliberations. Kelly is going to put them up on the screen so we can go through them. And I'll be welcoming Ben Rosser to the chair here to take us through this. But I'd like to get a mover first. Councillor Howard, seconder. Councillor Naya. Okay, welcome Ben. Thank you for coming today and taking us through this.
Thanks so much. Great to be here, and Dale Lofsowski does send his apologies, couldn't be here today. But I'm here to walk you through it and answer any questions that you may have. So the purpose of today's deliberations is to consider the submissions that have been received, the initial proposal, and determine whether any changes should be made or whether the initial proposal should be adopted as the final proposal. Today is not the meeting to formally resolve to adopt a final proposal. It's to decide what we want to do, discuss the submissions, and determine whether or not we think any changes should be made, or we're just going to adopt the initial proposal. So the initial proposal was adopted on the 4th of September. There was then a 3-week period for any person or organisation to make a submission. 62 submissions were received, and 2 of those submitters were heard at a hearing. Out of the 62 submissions, 32 were in support and 30 were opposed. But there were 9 submissions that were considered to be out of scope because the content of those submissions was limited to commentary on the Māori War decision, which is not part of this representation review. So taking those out, 32 submissions are in support, 21 are opposed. There were some varying reasons for those who opposed the initial proposal. Some didn't see any reason to make change, some didn't like the boundary change, others thought the number of councillors should be different, higher or lower, and at least one submitter thought that the names of those wards should be changed. So that's the purpose of today, to consider what we want to do. Do we want to leave the initial proposal as it is, or consider any changes? The 30th of October is the meeting date for the final proposal, so that's where the formal resolution will be made. That decision will result in a public notice of the final proposal. Then there'll be another 3-week period. This is a period for appeals or objections. So if the final proposal does not change from the initial proposal, then only those who made a submission on the initial proposal can appeal that decision. But if there are any changes at all, then that opens it up for anyone to make an objection. And if there are any objections or appeals that are received, then they go off to the Local Government Commission. They'll consider them and then make a binding determination, which will be in place for the 2025 election. The last thing I want to stress here is that any changes that are made to the proposal need to be supported by submissions. Can't come up with something completely new. Any change we make does need to be supported by a submission that was received. I'll take the report as read and open it up to any questions or discussion. Do you want to adopt the initial proposal or consider any changes?
Thank you, Ben. Any questions? Councillor Erin Wilson-Collins.
Sorry, you just noted there in your report there were a number of submissions that were relating to the Māori ward, which was not part of this consultation. And then you've removed those from the figures that you've given for opposing and supporting. I just wanted to clarify that with you, because a number of submissions mentioned the Māori ward, still gave a viewpoint on the proposal. So with it, is your removal,
Yeah.
if they mention it?
No, I've looked at those that only mentioned it.
And how many was it again, sorry?
9.
Thanks.
Further questions, councillor Vincent?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not endorsing this, but I did actually float in advance of the meeting the suggestion that perhaps we should explicitly refer to us not going with community boards, given that we had a submission which starts that as a proposition that we should be pursuing. Because I think if we don't include it in our decision, it's as though he never made a submission. And I'm just wondering procedurally whether is it going to require an amendment to say explicitly in the decision that the council does not agree to or has determined that it will not include community boards as part of this decision. So at least to acknowledge the existence of the submission put forward on Stanklin. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, well, it is more of a council process as to whether or not these recommendations ended or not. These are not the formal resolution of the final proposal. I don't see any issue with including in there that council agrees not to establish community boards, given that they are part of the submissions process. Someone has in the submissions discussed them.
I mean, I have actually, probably the only one in the room has had first-hand experience of community boards in Kaipara District, and the net effect was a month's delay in getting anything done. So I'm not advancing the cause, I'm just, in terms of the process and function that we're fulfilling, I just wonder if there's some wriggle room in here where if the mover and seconder were to agree, if someone magicked up some words, we could include in this decision today. So perhaps not so much a question directed to you.
Well, perhaps, Mr. Mayor, if I may, so through you put an initial proposal out, it didn't involve community boards. The resolution on the table doesn't talk about community boards because it just confirms the initial proposal. So by admission, you're not obviously addressing the community board anyway. So you could continue as it was, but what I'm reflecting also, Councillor Vincent, that you're saying that we've got a submission on it, you might want to, in the public's eye, point that out and say that you would like to record that. You don't have to though, because it is part of the initial proposal.
No, I realise it's implicit, perhaps.
It is.
Paragraph E, is it? Saying that agrees that there are no other changes to the initial proposal. I mean, that's implicit in there.
It is.
But I just would have thought it might have been a gesture, because he went to some trouble to acknowledge his submission, that's all.
But it's up to you as a councillor.
Okay, questions from councillor Lambert, followed by councillor Howard, followed by councillor Larson.
Yeah, just to go on from what Mark said, another submitter who actually, Ms. Bookerich, actually mentioned community boards, but when I questioned on it, she said she was against it. So that sort of balances it out a little bit, I think, too. Another Te Kaupapa resident too, so I'm just wondering whether...
But that's also acknowledging her question that she's opposed to them, then that's...
anyway.
Yeah.
Councillor Howard.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I guess to that, and it's seeking clarification from Councillor Vincent, I have some sympathy with the clarity of saying, making a point. I wonder, does this raise other potential matters of clarification as you know, you go through and you look at some of the other submitters? So yes, I mean, it's all good to have it clarified as a form. I know, and I guess where you're heading is for a form of acknowledgement that that particular submission has been received or acknowledged. I would hate to think that it opens up a can of worms for other areas.
Well, we are supposed to be responding to submissions. That's what today's about.
But aren't we doing that through our decision, ultimate decision?
Through you, Mr Mayor, can I just say, if we could look at the recommendation A, the first one of the resolution that's on the table at the moment, you are noting and appreciating the 62 submissions received. So that does cover that off. I do take Councillor Howard's point regarding, if you start getting into Pandora's box about noting all the different submission points, you could be here for quite some time. Whereas, A covers the fact that you've noted all of the submissions received and their entirety and what they've included. And obviously D agrees that the proposed, not D, E agrees that there are no other changes to the initial proposal, does cover that off in a general sense as well. So with those two recommendations, I do believe it is covered you sufficiently.
Well, we've had a talk about it now, haven't we?
Thank you, Mark. Councillor Larson.
Is this matter concluded? If it is, I won't speak further.
I think it is.
Any other questions?
Any more questions of Councillor Howard? Naya?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question, rhetoric maybe, is in terms of when you look at all the data, right? There is a mention of absentees residents, about 44% in Mangawhai. They have given addresses outside of Mangawhai. So in the scheme of mix, when you say you're representing the residents of a certain area, does it matter anywhere or not?
No, anyone can make a submission, whether they are residing in any particular ward or not, or even outside of the district. We did ask in the submission form, which ward do you reside in? We have that data as to how many of the submitters reside in Mangawhai or.
So again, my question is, so 44% of Mangawhai residents are mostly like 75% of that 40% reside in Auckland. So all I'm saying is, in terms of the schematics of the who you are representing in terms of wards, and does it matter whether they are absentee landlords or they are actually residents in that?
Apologies, I might need a little bit more clarification as to what you're actually asking.
Ben, CE Maris would like to ask you a question.
Not on that particular point, but I was just wondering, Ben, I'm just aware that, a lot of these league members haven't gone through the representation viewing process before. Can you just possibly just outline the situation where we get an appeal and the options that the Local Government Commission then has? I believe that it's a hearing and determination, but I'm not sure if that's changed given the.
Yeah, if there are any appeals or so, an appeal is someone who has made a submission on the initial proposal, and then council adopts the initial proposal as the final proposal, and that person who has made that submission decides to make an appeal. They don't like the fact that council hasn't taken on board their submission. That would come through to council, which would be forwarded to us, and we would be obligated to forward it onto the Local Government Commission. They would review all the appeals. They would look at all of these submissions. They would look at everything and then decide whether or not there is grounds to amend the arrangements as a result of that appeal. And it could be something like whether or not this boundary change that we're discussing between Wairoa and Otumatea, whether or not that should occur. The Commission does have the authority to overrule that, for example. That would be binding. So they'd be making a determination April next year. That would be binding and it would be in place for the 2025 election. They do quite seriously consider how many submissions have been received, how many appeals have been received, and whether or not they actually are reflective of the community. So they do take all of those things quite seriously, and they don't make just willy-nilly. They will consider everything in here before they make a determination.
Do they, if I may, Mr Mayor, do they still have the option for a hearing?
Yes, they do. They have tentatively scheduled a hearing, December or January next year.
March, I hope.
March next year. They don't always hold hearings, but they do if they feel like it's warranted.
I suppose I'm just sort of giving the council a feel for the timeframes and the necessary steps that we have to follow here, and why this is, deliberations and decision making in late October, and why we're going where we are. In the past two representation reviews, one of them went to a hearing. The Local Government Commission held a hearing and then made a determination, and then because we got appeals on the last two representation reviews. And then the last review was also an appeal, and the Local Government Commission made a determination without a hearing at that point. So just to give you an idea of, sort of next.
So it's a possibility and a reality that could happen.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you, through the mayor, just tell us what that last appeal was in the last representation review?
Couldn't recall off the top of my head, but it's just obviously, if you can get a feel for the submission, right?
Yeah.
So it's whoever.
You've got to have made a submission.
Based on their submission and what they wanted to see through, so they appealed it to the commission. Sorry, appealed it to the council, we sent it to the commission, and then they make a determination on it.
I think there's no change as a result of the.
There was no.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
Thank you. Any further questions? Thank you, Ben. Okay, mover's statement, which is councillor Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I think this is just about as an exact science as we could make it. We're dealing with percentages, and we're dealing with numbers and moving boundaries. We've had a lot of dialogue and discussion about it. I will say I have sympathy with some of the submitters in the West, not so much in wanting an additional member, but to have a member from outside of the immediate area of Dargable and maybe having a smaller ward. And I did raise that matter early on. It is a widespread area over the West. There is no doubt about that. However, members have chosen not to go with that, and I think that there's a certain reality. There's a certain reality of numbers of effective members that we need to really operate. There is a certain reality in my book about the viability of a district this size, but that's for another day. So, I think that we've been through it. We've listened to the submissions. I note that the submissions were pretty close this time to what they were last time. With that, let's take it to the vote.
Okay, can I have a second statement, which is councillor Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. All I would say, the whole exercise is focused on giving some fair representations within the parameters prescribed by the election commission body. And we have done our best. I mean, if you look at it, Wairau ward is actually having 8% plus there. So there was always room to go further. Maybe in the next election, there might be another member for Dargaville. But at present, I think whatever best we can do looks like this is the best option. Thank you.
Any other members wish to speak? Councillor Vincent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I am in support of the motion. However, I just would like to need some thoughts. Firstly, some history on what we're dealing with here, in that it is this split. The representation is entirely in relation to population, plus or minus 10%, because there was a time, as I recall from the dim deep past, when there were three factors, and I think there was a formula which weighted population, capital value and land area as factors to be weighed in determining the distribution of representation. But then maybe 20 years ago, it changed to solely population. And so that's what we have. And as a result of dissolving the Maori ward, then we end up with would only be if the number of people on the Maori roll was equally distributed across the district, that we wouldn't have to worry about a representation review, apart from the fact that we're legally required to have one, because there was submitters, or at least one submitter saying we didn't need to. I'm trying to make this relate to the submissions. There was at least one submitter who said we didn't need to do this. Well, legally and practically we do. So I just wanted to tick that off. And also, I want to take a swipe at the government for putting us in this position where I think, and our chief executive has described it as a representation review light, because of the time constraints. We don't really have the opportunity to do a thoroughgoing evaluation of options and engage fully with our community about those options and the implications and so on. So that's, I think, I can't see any way around it with the timeframes that were available. But this is where we're at as a result of the decision we made on this involving the Maori ward, which, you know, I accept until there's a ruling otherwise, was a valid decision made by this council. And so for simplicity's sake, we need to go with the resolution as it's stated. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Any further comments? Okay, believe there's right to reply, councillor Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't believe I have anything further to add. Okay,
we'll put it to the vote. All those in favour raise their hands. Aye. Aye. Against?
Against, can I have my vote recorded, please?
I think I can close deliberations and we'll be moving on to our briefing. Do you want to have a quick tea break?
Yeah, we'll have a cup of tea, Mr Mayor. We just need to sort out some presenters to attend.
Okay, so we'll just have a 5-minute, 10-minute break for a cup of tea while we organise the review.
Thank you.